Well, look at this. Hey, I'm mic'd up. I wasn't even sure if that was going to work. Hi, everybody. I'm assuming that we can start because it's 9 o'clock, but people are still coming in. Some of them I know. Hey, Zachy. Hi, everybody. My name is Brian. Is this up on the screen now? Everybody see that we are here to realize multi-AI ambitions with a data-first security approach? Yeah? Is that what that says? Yeah? Good? All right, awesome. So my name is Brian. I'm the field CTO at a company called Varonis. Anybody here know who Varonis is? Yeah. I used to ask that. I've been at Varonis for like 16 years. I used to ask that question and no hands went up. And it's been really fun over the last 16 years as I ask that question and more hands go up. So this is me when I took a really nice headshot. There's my LinkedIn if you want to go connect with me on LinkedIn. What I am here today to talk to you about is, this is a mouthful. I didn't make this agenda slide. But I'm going to go through what we're going to talk about today, because we got about 35, 45 minutes here. We're going to talk about balancing AI ambitions with security reality. That's a mouthful. We all want to deploy AI. What's the reality of security in a highly connected universe that we live in? How do we reduce the multi-AI blast radius, or the data security blast radius in general? How do we mitigate data exposure when we are training models, either building new models or refining or tuning the models that we have? And then how do we develop a proactive data security strategy? What we are really talking about, that was a lot of words. There's a lot of buzzwords in that agenda. What we're really talking about is how do we secure data in the age of AI, or especially in the age of generative AI. I personally, and this is probably going to get me shot by some conference sniper, I don't like using the term AI by itself, because we all know AI, however you use it, it's certainly artificial. It's not necessarily intelligent. And when we talk about generative AI, when we talk about all of the AI that everybody's been talking about this week and over the last 4 or 5 years, there's all kinds of technologies that we put under the umbrella of AI. I try to just use the word automation. So in a world of really intelligent automation that leverages data on-premises and in the cloud and in all of these various systems, how do we make sure that all of that data is properly secured? How do we make sure that we don't introduce or exacerbate or multiply the risks? 42% of leaders expect that their teams will be building multi-AI systems, and that number is only going to grow. We are all here this week talking about AI automation. We're here talking about AI because it's becoming more and more real. We're moving past the stage where we are kicking the tires, where we are playing around with these tools, where our boss or our manager says, see if you can do something useful with this. We are now building and deploying agents using Copilot Studio. We're now putting Copilot Chatbot and Copilot for 365 in front of all of our knowledge workers. We are now expecting to realize the benefits of all of this automation. But AI is really on a spectrum. There is no-code AI, the chatbots, the Copilot chats, the ChatGPTs, the Copilots for 365. There is pro-code AI deployments using Foundry and Copilot Studio. AI is on this long, big spectrum. And we're trying to get the value of all of these tools and all of these technologies as quickly as possible, but as safely as possible. When we think about multi-AI ambitions, what does it mean from a data security standpoint? Well, the average enterprise or mid-sized corporation isn't just using the out-of-the-box chatbot or just turning on Copilot for 365 for users' OneDrive and their inbox. We're now building and deploying a mix of technologies that connect to a mix of infrastructure, data stores, and applications. Multiple agents, multiple Copilots often allow us to interact with systems that we never interacted with before. But from a data security and a risk standpoint, it introduces a lot of new problems that we need to solve. How many of you here have Microsoft Copilot for 365? Every hand is going to go up. 3 years ago, not every hand went up. Copilot for 365, the way it works is you prompt Copilot. And then it goes out and accesses the data that you have access to. Actually, I use those words inappropriately. What it does is when you prompt Copilot for 365, it looks at the graph. And it looks at a content index, a semantic index that's built on top of that graph, which includes, of course, all of the SharePoint Online sites that you have access to. your OneDrive shares that you have access to, the team sites that you have access to, which of course, because we're at Microsoft, are all just SharePoint sites, including the private channels in all of those team sites, which are individual SharePoint sites. And all of those SharePoint sites have document libraries, which contain folders, which contain files. Copilot also has access to your inbox, so it's going to look at all of your emails too. But when I say Copilot looks at the graph and it looks at the content index built on top of the graph, what Copilot's going to do is going to look at the relationships between your identity, the prompting user, and all of the data in all of those places that your identity has access to. So let's start doing the math. Every one of those files can have shared links. Each one of those shared links can contain both Enter ID groups and SharePoint groups that relate to the directory of that SharePoint site. There are access controls on the file, access controls on the folder, access controls on the SharePoint site. So my identity, when I prompt Copilot, has access to a wide variety of information in lots of different places. We also live in a world now where there is frictionless collaboration. I can create a document from any one of my devices, click the share button, and share it with any one of you, or anybody in my organization, or a distribution list, or a group. So the great thing about using Copilot for 365 is that the relationship between my identity and all of that data means my identity has access to a wide variety of information in lots of different places, some of it in containers that I control, like my OneDrive share or my inbox, some of it in places where I've just been collaborating with others, like their OneDrive share or a team site or a SharePoint Online site that I'm a part of. Now, let's use Copilot Studio. We're going to extend Copilot to other applications and data sources, like Salesforce.com. Many of you might use Salesforce.com. We use Salesforce at Varonis to manage a wide variety of business processes and customer relationships. It is an incredibly powerful cloud application. It's infrastructure in and of itself. So when I connect Copilot to Salesforce, suddenly I now have to worry about the agent that I am building having access to data inside Salesforce, except Salesforce isn't a collection of SharePoint sites. It's not a collection of files and folders and document libraries. Access to data inside Salesforce isn't controlled by Enter ID groups and SharePoint groups and shared links. Data inside Salesforce is controlled via access controls, but an identity in Salesforce has access to data in Salesforce based on their profile and their permission sets, and the groups of permission sets, which are called permission set groups, the roles and the hierarchy of various roles, the object settings, the share permissions, the mute permissions. Many of you might be an expert in how SharePoint is set up and controls access to data. Not all of you might be experts in how Salesforce controls access to data. But if you use Salesforce and you're connecting Copilot to your Salesforce environment so that your users that have access to Salesforce, you're probably going to trust that your Salesforce team is doing a good job of making sure that all the identities have access to all of the right data inside their Salesforce environment. Except I was sitting with a security leader yesterday. I'm at Microsoft Ignite. So a big part of my job is meeting with organizations that are worried about data security. And I asked him point blank, how confident are you that all of the right identities have access to all of the right data inside your Salesforce environment? And he gave me a really, really specific number that I think showed just how unsure he was. He said 70% confident. Well, in security, if you're only 70% confident that your data is secure, it might as well be 0. So if you're going to connect Copilot and the users that are prompting Copilot, and you're going to give them the ability to leverage the power of that technology, and you're going to connect it to Salesforce, you better be sure that that prompting user, when they prompt Copilot and Copilot leverages an agent, that that identity only has access to only the right data. Now, we've got to do the same thing in Slack, because we're going to build an agent that has access to data in Slack. Now, in Slack, it's not profiles and permission sets. It's not SharePoint groups and Enter ID groups. It's not shared links. It's all kinds of access controls in your various workspaces. In Salesforce specifically, there are dozens of permissions in a single profile and a single permission set. The average enterprise has more than 1,000 permission sets. When we do this, when we start connecting agents into other systems, it's not just Salesforce. It's not just Slack. It's not Jira. It's all of these individual applications and infrastructure that we're connecting into have a different set of access controls that control what that identity has access to. So unless you're confident that you know that every identity has access to just the data that they're supposed to, and you're really confident that only the right data is in only the right places, and you're really confident that everything is properly monitored, you're introducing risk that didn't exist before. In Jira, we have to worry about administrative roles and development roles, user permissions, global permissions, project permissions, permission schemes. We have to unravel all of the various ways, all of the various pathways that identities get access to data. And as we start building and deploying more and more agents, suddenly the security issues, the governance issues, the privacy issues related to identities and data start to multiply. What we're trying to do is manage and effectively reduce a multi-AI blast radius. I use the term blast radius because it's really evocative. Blast radius is what is the damage that would happen when something goes wrong. If one of your identities were compromised, and something like 90% of security breaches involve a compromised identity. Attackers don't break in, they log in. They get access to a user or an API, and then they use that access to move laterally, elevate permissions, establish persistence, and get access to, and potentially exfiltrate or encrypt data. Managing a multi-AI blast radius means managing the fact that sensitive data is in places we don't know about, accessible by people we don't know about, often exposed to everybody. And that exacerbates the risks of insider threats and outside attackers and non-compliance due to data access violations. Another way to think about it is, when we're trying to manage a multi-AI blast radius, what we're really trying to do is manage operational risk, regulatory risk, and reputational risk. How do we know what data we have, where it is, who and what's got access to it, and how do we make sure that that blast radius is effectively reduced? How do you do that? Well, as we start connecting identities to data stores, as we start building, configuring, and deploying agents, we need to do a few things. For every knowledge source, whether it's SharePoint Online and Microsoft 365, or data in Azure SQL, or data in Microsoft Fabric, or data in an external system like Salesforce.com, or AWS, or Google, or Slack, all of the places that we are connecting these agents and identities to, we need to make sure that we revoke excessive access. There is no need, generally, for data to be available to every single identity. At Varonis, we have a data security platform, so we do risk assessments for big organizations. On average, 40% of the data in a given given infrastructure and data store is open to quite literally every identity. Why would that be, you ask? Because things tend to fail open. It is much easier to leave things open and let things work than just try to put locks on doors and strict controls in place that get in the way of people being able to do their job. We need to fix misconfigurations. Salesforce, which is now focusing more and more on security because they're realizing just how business critical the underlying data in that infrastructure is. Salesforce, at their first security keynote at Dreamforce a couple of months ago, said that the primary issue that organizations need to worry about is fixing misconfigurations, making sure that MFA is turned on for the right identities, and that your various tenants and applications within your Salesforce environment are properly configured. That's really important, but we also need to worry about data loss prevention, applying data labels so that DLP works to block sensitive data from being exfiltrated or flowing into the wrong places. We need to remove third-party applications. We need to remove stale access, stale identities, and we need to archive stale data, redundant, obsolete, or trivial data. If you do all these things well, you're effectively managing your blast radius. But some of you that are practitioners that do this for a living might realize doing even one of these things in even one of the infrastructure that I've been talking about can be incredibly difficult. Varonis, the company that I work for, integrates with Microsoft Purview to help you through Sentinel Data Lake to help you manage your blast radius, to help you understand and see who and what has access to what data. I want to tell you a story about Copilot for 365 and the dangers that can happen if you turn this on without managing your blast radius. We do work with highly regulated industries in every country in the world, in every vertical, which means we do business with a lot of big banks. The job that I had, when you go to my LinkedIn, you'll see, the job that I had before I came to Varonis, I was in IT architecture at a big bank, UBS, big Swiss bank. And one of the things that I learned being in IT at a really big bank is if you want to see who gets the most love from IT at a bank, you go to the trading floor. These are the people that have 9 monitors, and they have the latest devices and the latest phones. And when I was in IT, because I was in architecture, I was a level 3 or a level 4 service request escalation point. And our SLA for users on the trading floor was something like 90 seconds, meaning if a trader opened a help desk ticket, we had to have a body at the desk within 90 seconds. Because if a trader can't do their job, if there is some piece of technology that is preventing them from working, the bank doesn't make any money. The flip side of that is, if you want to test a tool, if you want to see how valuable a productivity tool is, you give it to the traders. Because if you can make them more productive, the bank will make more money. So we were working with another big bank, and they were piloting Microsoft Copilot for 365, as you do. Many of you have probably run or been involved in pilots for Copilot. But every Copilot pilot kept getting stuck in pilot. And here's why. When they gave it to one of these traders, this trader asked a really interesting question. Because the bank has been around for, I don't know, decades, maybe more than 100 years. I actually don't know how long this particular bank has been around. But they have collected and analyzed a whole lot of information. And this trader asked what I thought was a really interesting question, because surely Copilot has access to a lot of information, and it will know things like when employees have bonus schedules and what kinds of equities and funds employees like to invest in and how they think about their retirement and their investments. So he asked Copilot, what stocks do our employees invest in? Because what he thought was he would get a couple of paragraphs. Somebody somewhere had done some analysis, or there are data sets out there that Copilot could leverage to give him a couple of paragraphs of a summary of the kinds of things that the bank's employees invest in. So he thought he would get a couple of paragraphs of text, like you would get from ChatGPT. What did he get? He got thousands of lines of names and social security numbers and account numbers of employee 401ks. This is what the bank's employees, the stocks the bank's employees invest in. So what did they do? They immediately shut it off because it was a privacy nightmare. And I told this story to some very technical people, and they got mad at me. They said, that's not how Copilot works. Copilot does not give you access to data that you don't have access to. All of the access controls that we as an enterprise need in order to govern access to sensitive information, of course they exist. And Copilot is not going to break any access controls. Of course it's not. It's going to respect the fact that this particular user only has access to the data that the access controls in their SharePoint environment give this user access to, except what went wrong? So we did a root cause analysis, and it turns out somebody on the bank's compensation team had created a spreadsheet analyzing employee 401ks, as she was supposed to do. She was just doing her job. And she saved that spreadsheet in a team site, as she was supposed to do, because that's where we save data. And the people on her team had access to it, but she needed to collaborate with somebody else, so she created a shared link, as she was supposed to do. That's how collaboration works. And she created a shared link, and she shared that link with an Enter ID group, as she was supposed to do, because that's how we share. You can share with individual users, you can share with groups, you can share with distribution lists. And inside that group was the people that were on the compensation team, or whoever she was supposed to collaborate with, as she was supposed to do. Except inside that group was another group, which is completely legitimate. Sometimes we have groups nested in groups, right? But inside that second group was an entity, and those of you that have been SharePoint administrators might recognize this. It's an entity called everyone except external users. So when she clicked share and collaborated with other people inside the bank as she was supposed to do, unbeknownst to her, she was opening up that spreadsheet to every single user on the tenant. Was she an insider threat? No. Was the trader who asked Copilot what stocks do I invest in an insider threat? No. Were they trying to perpetuate a data breach? No. Who made the mistake? I don't know. Whoever configured that second group, it could have been a decade ago. Who knows? Here's the problem. I ask security leaders all the time, or I used to, what keeps you up at night? Because what you really want to hear is an answer like, cybercriminal groups, nation states, insider threats, ransomware. But I stopped asking that question because the answer was always the same. What keeps me up at night isn't what I know that I need to fix, it's what I don't know. To paraphrase Donald Rumsfeld, it's the unknown unknowns. And here is the problem. In a world where we've got data on premises and we've got data in the cloud, we've got data in files, we've got data in emails, we've got thousands upon thousands of databases, we've got major SaaS applications, we've got hyperscalers. Everything is connected together by API, and now we are building and configuring AI assistants, chatbots, in a multi-agent world. The blast radius of something going wrong, the risk of something going wrong is skyrocketing. Going back to our trader, that spreadsheet existed. That spreadsheet represented a level of risk. But risk is two key factors. One is the impact of something going wrong, like somebody getting access to employee 401k data. But the second factor is the probability, the likelihood of that happening. Up until giving that trader Copilot for 365, the probability of somebody seeing that information, potentially stealing it, monetizing it, using it, breaching it, was exceptionally low. You would have to know which team site to go to, in which folder, in which document library. You'd have to know exactly where that data is to go find it, except now we are giving end users and now agents the greatest information retrieval tools in the history of mankind. 90% of organizations, and I think this number is low, 90% of organizations have data in Microsoft 365 files that are exposed to all employees that can be surfaced by Copilot. The reason I think that number is low is that we are still in the age of every Copilot pilot getting stuck in pilot. But that's going to stop. The other way to think about it is, in a few years, we are all going to have Microsoft Copilot for 365 because it is how we are going to work. All of you work for companies who are now hiring kids out of college, and their entire college career has been spent in a world with ChatGPT. Meaning, within the next 5 years, we are going to expect, as knowledge workers, to have access to copilots and agents and generative AI-based tools. So this number is only going to go up. If we are going to reduce the blast radius of generative AI usage in Microsoft 365 so that we can safely use Copilot Chat and Microsoft 365 Copilot, you need to know not just where all of your sensitive data is, because data is like life in Jurassic Park. It just finds a way. Nobody knew that that spreadsheet existed in that team site. It doesn't even matter. This presentation that I am presenting to you from does not exist in my OneDrive or in any team site. It is in the OneDrive of one of our product marketing managers, because he is the one that helped me build all of these slides. If I open this up inside a web browser, you will see his name, not mine. I say that because it doesn't matter where data is anymore. You can't control data with role-based access based on a hierarchy like we used to 20 years ago when everything lived on a file server. It doesn't matter where these files exist, because anybody can just click share and share it with anybody else. We collaborate frictionlessly from any device, from anywhere in the world with anybody. Data is cross-functional by its very nature. So you better know where it is. You better classify it. You better label it so that Purview will stop it from being sent or shared or exfiltrated dangerously. And you need to automate least privilege. A fancy way of saying, you better use a robot to figure out who and what's got access to this, where and how it's exposed, whether it's sensitive or not, and who should and shouldn't have access to it. That's before you turn things on. After you turn things on, you better watch what people are prompting, how the responses are being crafted, what data is being referenced during a response. Would you know if somebody asked Copilot something like, show me the executive team's salary? And would you know if anything sensitive were returned? Would you know if somebody asked Copilot, are there any files out there that have credentials like logins or passwords, API keys, private tokens, or connection strings? And would you know if any files that contain that kind of information were referenced in order to create the response? And even if you have that telemetry, how quickly could you detect and effectively respond to a threat without being drowned in noise? You also need to classify and label newly created data. You need to manage permissions over time, and you need to alert on anomalous access and misuse. That's just for Microsoft 365, but we are in a multi-agent, multi-AI world. So as we start leveraging Microsoft Foundry, Microsoft Fabric, and Copilot Studio, you need to do the same things. You need to classify data across all of the data stores and infrastructure that you're going to be connecting to, which, if I could predict the future, is all of your data in all of the applications, whether you're using them right now or not. I'm going to pick on Salesforce again, only because Varonis leverages Salesforce. We use it. We love it. Every time we onboard a new SaaS application or a new piece of infrastructure these days, and this has been true for years, every time we sign up for a new SaaS application, before we sign the contract, usually before we even run a POC, somebody says, how do we connect this into Salesforce? Because if it's not connected to Salesforce, it's probably not going to be as valuable as we need it to be. Now think of this in terms of a multi-AI world. Every piece of infrastructure, every data store that you've got, I don't care if it's in a database, if it's in a file system, if it's in a SaaS application, if it's in a Microsoft hyperscaler or somewhere else, somebody's going to ask, how do we connect our AI agents to this infrastructure, this data store, this application, to get the most possible value out of it? But that means that you need to ensure that the identities that are authenticating to this data store, this application, this infrastructure, only have access to what they're supposed to. Because another way to think about agents is they are just identities. And you need to audit that access. You need to ensure least privilege. And you better automate that. Because just doing it in one piece of infrastructure like Microsoft 365 or Salesforce or Jira or Slack is a massive project on its own. We have lived in a world of frictionless collaboration and automation for so long that now we need robots to fix the problems that the robots created. Because there is not enough people out there. You cannot hire enough people to do this on your own. And once you have deployed an agent, you better monitor the prompts, monitor the responses, monitor the interactions between the agents and other agents and the data that they are accessing. You better alert on anomalous access. Boy, was that a mouthful. And alert on any new data flows or any new connections. The last thing we need to worry about is training data exposure, because many of us are training new models or refining existing models on proprietary data in order to make them more useful. NIST has some controls here as well. We need to understand, map, and monitor inappropriate access to cloud resources. We need to monitor and alert on data exfiltration through misconfigured APIs and integrations. And we need to look for compromised service accounts and non-human identities. Basically, we need approaches for mapping AI technology and the legal, regulatory, operational, and reputational risks to the data in all of the places that we are either training or refining models. If we are going to protect training and fine-tuning data, none of this is going to be rocket surgery to all of you right now, since you've been listening to me talk about data security for the last, I don't know, half hour. But you need to classify your data, whether it's structured or unstructured. You need to audit access to and access of all of that data. You need to automate least privilege. Don't leave sensitive information open to everyone or everything, or I guarantee you, you will get burned. I'm going to use another very easy analogy in security. Imagine that you used a credit card and you never got a bank statement. And the credit card company that you did business with didn't audit anything. How long would your money stay in your account? How long would it take for them to detect and respond to fraud? I have a couple of credit cards, and the story that I tell was a few years ago. Within 30 seconds, I got a text, a phone call, and an email because my credit card number had been used to buy gas in Montreal. Buying gas with a stolen credit card number is a very common and predictable technique for a threat actor because it is very low risk, and it tells them whether the card number is valid and can be used for other things. My credit card company knew instantly that I don't live in Montreal, I wasn't in Montreal at that time, and that my number was being used for potentially fraudulent activity. So within seconds, they shut everything off and they let me know through phone calls, texts, and emails. No damage was done at all. They already had another card number ready for me. They had another physical card in the mail. Worked for me. This is why we use credit cards, or one of the reasons that we use credit cards. Imagine trying to protect your data without having any idea what it is, where it is, who and what's got access to it, or how it's being used. Yet that's how we have approached data protection and data security for a very long time. Security has often been pretty far down the priority stack, behind convenience and productivity. That's probably never going to change. But in a world of multi-AI agents connecting all of our systems, suddenly the risk is skyrocketed, which means we need to think about governance, risk, security, and privacy to ensure that we're not introducing regulatory, operational, and reputational risks that we're unable to measure, or unable to control for. So, what do you do? How do we develop a proactive data security strategy? Lots of $10 words here. How do we protect ourselves? I'm going to tell you the other easiest joke that I've been telling for 16 years going on stage talking about data security. I can get all of your security risk down to a measurable 0, and I can do it incredibly quickly. Give me an afternoon, I'll write a PowerShell script, I will delete all of your data. Easiest sensible chuckle in data security. But you can't do that. Why can't you do that? Because the data has value, and deleting it all would eliminate all of that value. Our businesses, our organizations would not be able to function. We would not be able to fulfill our mission. So you can't delete the data. You also can't delete all of the access. So how do we actually secure ourselves? How do we minimize regulatory, operational, and reputational risk? There are 3 things that you really need to worry about. 1, observability. Do we know what data we have and where it is? Do we know, with a reasonable degree of accuracy, what data is sensitive, what data is important? Do we know who and what has access to it? Are we actually mapping all of those access controls? Many of you may have looked at data security posture management. Start to ask yourselves very critically, what are we actually measuring? Let's go back to the Microsoft 365 example. You can do all of the work needed to secure to ensure that the sites are configured properly and that the right people have access to the right groups that are at the high level of the site. But unless you are actually looking at the access controls on all of the document libraries, all of the individual folders, and all of the individual files, including all of the individual shared links, and you are unraveling the identities and the entitlements, the users and the groups that are in all of the above, what are you actually doing? I'm at a big financial services firm, one of the big credit rating agencies. We were in a room, and their director of GRC told us they had spent 9 months going through every single SharePoint site and ensuring that they knew who the owner of that site was and that that owner certified that only the right people were in only the right groups at the top level of every one of their sites. And he believed that that meant that they had applied good governance and security controls on all of their SharePoint sites. And then we showed them one individual file, and we showed them all of the people that were in all of the shared links on that one file. And they realized they spent 9 months doing absolutely nothing. Because unless you turn off the ability for people to share, and good luck doing that in the year of our Lord 2025, you will not control any access unless your observability includes the depth of visibility that you need to actually see who has access to what. And you better unravel that for every piece of infrastructure and data store that you are now deploying agents to. You need to fix the problems that you will find because you will find lots of problems. And those fixes better be automatic because you do not have enough people to do this. You will spend from now until the end of the age of the universe reviewing access to data. Some of you might be thinking, and I say this because I've been doing this for a long time and I've had these kind of conversations with lots of folks, all we need to do is identify the data owners, the custodians, the stewards, and then have them make the decisions. We don't live in that world anymore. You're not going to have a data owner for every shared link on every file in your 365 environment, let alone every record in your Salesforce environment, let alone every single container within every single S3 bucket or Azure SQL container, let alone all of the connections in your Microsoft Fabric data lakehouse. It is impossible to find owners for all of this stuff. You need robots to help you fix and manage the problems that robots have created. And you better have always-on data-centric UEBA. I say that because if you're only looking at the configurations and the posture and the authentication and the identities and the network, you will miss the access to the data. if you are not watching the data with the context of what it is, where it is, who and what's accessing it, and how they got there, you will miss things. So observability, remediation, and detection. If you can do those things well, you're doing a really good job. In my experience, not everybody is doing a really good job in all of the places that they need to worry about data. And what has changed in the last 5 years is now all of these data stores, all of this infrastructure is connected together. And now we're putting automated agents out there and then giving the interactions to those agents to end users with prompts that have no conception of anything that I've just talked about, because that is not their job. People just want to get their job done, which is why you end up with spreadsheets containing 401k data open to every single person at the bank, and nobody knows about it. Because it's nobody's job to know about that. Except you guys, because you're all here in this room listening to a talk about data security. So here's a multi-AI flight plan. It is very, very easy for me to build PowerPoint slides. It's very hard to actually implement this. I say that because I'm about to show you a bunch of steps that you can take, and I realize none of this is as easy as pushing a button. However, this is a very good framework for how you should think about deploying agents in a multi-AI world. Before you start turning things on, make sure you have a data security platform. Make sure you're leveraging the tools and technologies that you have available to you, and I can almost bet that many of you do not have all of the tools and technologies that you would need to do this. When you complete initial scans, and a data security platform is going to scan a lot of things. It's going to be scanning data. It's going to be scanning access controls. It's going to be monitoring behavior. You're going to start to see where you have data that's labeled and not labeled. Data labels can be an exceptionally powerful tool for ensuring that DLP works. They can also give you a false sense of security. We did a risk assessment with one of the big casinos. And before we did that risk assessment, the CISO told us, you're going to find spreadsheets that contain the PII. You're going to find spreadsheets that contain PII, because their account managers learned years ago that they could access Excel documents from their phones. So they would start putting the contact information for their highest value accounts into spreadsheets that they could access from their phones. Now, it's a casino, so the highest value accounts for the account managers at casino are people like billionaires and their kids, because it turns out billionaires and their kids really like going to casinos. So they would like having all of those cell phone numbers to be able to send texts like, hey, we've got a suite available to you. Do you want to fly in? Now, the CISO told us, you're going to find that kind of stuff everywhere. But we require that all of our users apply labels to all of their data, so all of those spreadsheets are marked as confidential, because we don't allow you to access them from personal devices, which is a completely cromulent control, because you don't want somebody accessing something highly sensitive from their kid's Chromebook that's never been patched. Sorry, Google. So we did the scans. What did we find? Tens of thousands of spreadsheets that contained the cell phone numbers of billionaires and their kids, and thousands of them were marked as public. Now, why would that be? Turned out their account managers figured out, some of them figured out, if they marked them as public, they could work from home. Right? And then someone made a copy of the sheet and sent it to somebody else, and that person made a copy. And then, somewhere along the line, someone took one of those spreadsheets and turned it into a template. And then that template got used to create a bunch of new ones. So according to the controls that they were using and the reporting that they were getting, all of their data was labeled. Lots of sensitive information was mislabeled. So when you start applying and fixing security labels, you got to make sure that they're accurate and that they stay accurate, because again, end users just want to do their job, and some of them don't want to commute down to the Las Vegas Strip. You're going to need to remediate high-risk exposure. One of the key things here is that you need to look at behavior. I joked before that I could just delete all of your data and you would have no more data security risk. I could do the same thing with exposure. I could just eliminate exposure. The problem there is what is going to break. We went through a version of this process with Tampa General Hospital, and their biggest fear, once we started identifying sensitive data like PHI and identifying exposure like shared links that exposed that PHI through files, was that if we implemented stricter controls, we might take away access from their doctors and their nurses to PHI, which would impact patient care. And when you're in a hospital and you're a security team at a hospital and you start implementing controls that impact patient care, that's how you tend to lose your job. My first job was on a help desk. I think everybody should work on a help desk. And my boss told me, you know what? The fastest way to get yourself in trouble is if you start fixing things and you don't know what's going to happen when you apply the fix. So as you start removing and remediating high-risk exposure, like sensitive information that's open to every identity on the tenant or every person or identity or account in the infrastructure, make sure you're watching behavior so that you don't remove anything that's actively being used. In the case of Tampa General Hospital, we watched all of the behavior of all of the accounts for about 3 months. So when we started removing exposure, we only did it to the permissions and the exposures that were not being used. It turned out 99.8% of the links that exposed PHI were not being used. 0.2% were. We didn't touch those, which meant that they dramatically reduced risk, but they did it without impacting patient care. That is the best way to ensure that you are implementing security controls, is not to break anything. You need to review access to critical data. In that case, we took the 0.2% of links. It was a few hundred links. And because we were watching behavior, we knew exactly who and what was using them so they could go have some very pointed conversations about how to reconfigure the process that involved public links to PHI. When you do all of this well, when you ensure the right preventive controls and you've got good detective controls in place and you've labeled all of your data, downstream DLP doesn't become a dirty word. You're not getting in people's way. You're just implementing really, really useful security controls. Purview becomes exceptionally valuable, exceptionally quickly when you do all of this automatically. Once you start deploying either Copilot for 365 or agents that you have built in Copilot Studio or models that you have built in Microsoft Foundry that leverage all of that data that you've got so that you can monetize it and get more value out of it, you need ongoing monitoring. Who and what is using this data? But monitoring by itself does not detect threats. You need the context of sensitivity, the context of access, the context of device and service usage, the context of geolocation, so that you can enrich all of that behavior so they're not getting drowned in alerts. I've worked with every security team in every vertical of every company size, public, private, all over the world. And I'll tell you right now, if you've got a security analyst that's getting more than 15 or 20 alerts a day, what are they going to do? They're going to ignore them. If you are ignoring alerts, how valuable are they? Until something happens, and then you go back in time and you say, oh yeah, the alert was triggered 2 weeks ago, but nobody looked at it. So if you automate access controls and minimize the blast radius, it is far less likely that something bad is going to happen. If you've got good DLP in place that leverages accurate labels, it is far less likely that anything bad is going to happen. If you are applying good data lifecycle management and getting rid of redundant, obsolete, and trivial data because you have all of this context, it is far less likely that anything is going to happen, which means when an alert is triggered, it is far more likely that that alert is useful and actionable. And you will minimize the time it takes to detect and respond to threats. And because you have all of the right telemetry in place, it turns out that continuously and automatically classifying and labeling data, applying least privilege, minimizing exposure becomes possible. Thank you all very much. We have 2 minutes left. If anybody's got a question, there's a microphone right there. Otherwise, I'm going to hang around here. But thank you all. I really appreciate your time. Enjoy the rest of the conference.